You know, the rise of PC culture it's not a new thing. It's something that they, even for the last like couple hundred years, basically did, like on a regular basis. They've been doing it, applying it, you know, socially. This idea that you make culture suddenly this restrictive thing. Well, not suddenly, but you like lean into that, lean into people's, you know, desire to like fucking control everyone else, you know, micromanage everyone else. They just lean into that, and they do it, you know. It used to be like, you know, every 50 years and every 20 years, and now we're seeing it, you know. We're going to see it, it's going to speed up, it's going to happen again, you know. We're going to see it lean back now the other way, you know. Culture is going to become less restrictive before 2030, and it's going to be such a sudden, like, it's going to feel like we were never even here, basically. The same types of people that are so vehemently anti-racist now will be literally the same genre of person, at least, you know, only a couple years younger. Will be mocking people and laughing at people for not being racist, not being able to take a racist joke. The same people, you know, they got conned the other way. And the reason they do this is because, well, the reason they do anything is because it's a distraction. But the reason they do this is a very, very specific, crafty way of distracting people from tightening, worsening material circumstances. So you make culture. You make the culture that people are existing in this restrictive, you know, browbeating, fucking micromanagement, nagging bitch thing, yeah? Where they're beset on all sides by people telling them that they're bad and they're wrong and they can't do this and they can't do that and they can't do this and they can't do that. And then when, you know, as the transitory period comes to an end, basically as you become unable to hold back the tide of, you know, increasing, you know, inflation, increasing housing prices, increasing food prices, then you start to loosen the belt on culture so people can have their outlets again. They can have their racism, they can have their bad jokes, they can have their, you know, so-called un-PC culture. They can have that, you know, because people do, they need it. And so people realize this, and it's just such a relief to them after like 4 or 5, 6 or 7, 8 or 9, 10 years or whatever of just being told that they're a cunt, they're a cunt, they're a bad person, they're a cunt, they're evil, you're a cunt, you're a bastard, you're evil, you're useless, you're evil, you can't do anything, stop it, die, kill yourself, die. And then as soon as that stops, basically, they don't realize that, you know, everything's gone. They you know, they might mention it to their friends. Oh wow, you notice things are more expensive, blah blah blah. But they'll let it go. They'll not be so willing to. They won't want to make any kind of stand on that. They'll just be so fucking relieved that they can call people niggers again. That they can, you know, tell gay people they're faggots. That will just distract them completely. The fact that they're now allowed to be mean to their fellow man again, or they're told they're allowed to be mean. They're not constantly like you see what I'm saying? It's genius. It's so simple that I can't help but like just marvel at it, because it's a great example of achieving the most effect with the absolute least movement, you know. That is like, you know, whether it's them saving as much money, making as much money while saving as much money, or creating the most discord while sowing the least discord, you know, just doing the absolute minimum to create the absolute maximum effect. Whenever I see anything that can be categorized as an application of this ethos, I am impressed, I can't lie, even if it's about raping my people and killing my friends and destroying lives, you know. I can't help but be like, damn, you're really good at raping people, man. You're really good at sticking that dick in my ass. Wow. Wow. You know? It's impressive, you know, that they've been able to maintain this. It's a very fine balance, and they've maintained it pretty much uninterrupted for about 200 years now. Like, I don't even count the First World War and the Second World War as real, any kind of real you know, rebellion, any kind of real lashing out, you know. That's not what it was. World War One was a fucking arms show. That's what it was. It was just a chance to, you know, show off all the new military technology. That's all it was. It was about selling guns. It had nothing to do with any of the politics shit that was involved. You know, all of that shit was overblown at the time by the media on purpose. That was like the first application of like really using journalism to like take something that was a minor issue and turn it into something that was like, you know, like I say, it's rounded across the world, you know, for the last century. We remember it, you know, we'll remember it long past here, but for all the wrong reasons. At the end of the day, you know, it was fucking, you know, these niggas wanted to show off all their new guns. They wanted to flash their fucking gold teeth, basically. That's what they were doing, you know. World War II wasn't even a fucking world war, you know. World War II was a rebellion against the World Bank, basically. That's what it was. It was people didn't want to fall in line with the new banking system. Some people who had been kind of fucked, you know, whether it was in more recent times, closer to then, like Germany had, or, you know, Japan, you know, they got totally screwed in the because of the Meiji Revolution. Like, they got totally fucking arse raped. Like, they were sold it as this, like, freedom from the tyrannic samurai, you know, the tyrannic feudal system that had been maintained for so long. And I guess on some level it was, you know, it had to be. Tokugawa Ieyasu needed to kind of continue with those policies that Hideyoshi had implemented during his short reign, because and intensify them, you know, with all, you know, banning swords and all of that kind of shit, because they'd passed the point where Japanese feudalism was going to maintain order anymore, and they realized that. And whatever my beliefs or whatever I feel about individual rulers and things like that, at the same time I can look at that and say, at least they were ruled by themselves, you know. Post Meiji Revolution, they were just like a fucking British American colony, basically, already. World War II was them trying to get out from under that, and they got nuked into a fucking oblivion for daring, you know, and then they just got turned into an American colony, like a globalist colony, you know, globalist merchant caste colony. That's what they are. Like, you can't even think of it in terms of countries, you know. Britain, the British Empire, you know, America, they've always been like proxy servers to access human resources of a certain country to apply them against other countries, you know, both the human resources and, you know, technology and all that. I mean, all of that's downstream of human resources. I think that phrase covers it, to be honest. You know what I mean. And like, that's, yeah, basically World War II was just people rejecting that, basically. Just refusing to you know, accept being a penal colony of some merchants. It was like the last holdout of like the warrior caste, Iron Age warrior caste, before they entirely got them flipped on their heads. And this is another thing you gotta understand. This is very new, you know. Never has there been a time in human history where any caste of humans, you know, castes exist, maybe not in the way that the Indians, for example, implement it necessarily, or at least are thought to implement it. But caste 100% exists, and it's just much more of a basic, just human thing. There were warriors, there are merchants, there are priests in every fucking culture. And these people are just better at certain things and just trying towards certain things. And anyway, because, you know, physical superiority has just been the dominating force for the majority of human history. You had to be able to fight and hunt, you know? You needed men who could fight and hunt. That's what you needed. You needed men who could fight and hunt and make things. That was it, you know? There was no room for the roaming trader, you know? That was a fucking luxury. That was absolutely like you know, traders pretty much for a long time, you know, wandering traders and things like that. They pretty much, they're just smugglers. That's what they were. They're a trader, a merchant. It just meant you smuggled in illegal goods, because everyone was much more possessive over their region's produce. You know, it was a big thing, you know, to take a specific type of apple or grape even just out of a fucking region, if it was particularly good and brought in a, you know, a good amount of wealth for that region's rulers. You know, they'd kill and die over that. The most extreme version, I think, is probably the silkworm that everyone thinks of, but it was that 100 times over, widespread for the entire human history. Like, there was no niche for traders to exploit other than stealing and robbing and killing. Like, that's what they had to do. Like, and then their produce, you know, whatever they would bring back, you know, from other regions, they got paid nice sums for it, but they were criminals. They were the criminal caste. They were, you know, relegated to the shadows, because this world had no place for them. And you see what I'm getting at now? Now that's been flipped for the first time. It's been slowly being chipped away at. Now it's done. Yeah? The merchant caste are the ruling caste. You know, all you need, you can get rich just by knowing how to do numbers nowadays, bro. Like really deep, like that. Like, you don't need any kind of talent in any way. Yeah, you can just go work a shitty wagey job, you know, for 6 years, and save all your money and live in a fucking car and just invest it well. Just invest as much as you can, and invest it well, and you're sorted. You can live off that. You can even generate fucking real wealth off that. That's insane, bro. Like, you tell that, people talk about, oh, if you showed XY stupid fucking song to some cunt middle-aged peasant, they'd die. I'm like, no, bro. If you told them that people could become barons and kings by writing numbers on paper and clicking buttons on a magic machine, you know, that sent magic signals to the other side of the world, they would piss themselves laughing. They would probably either, you know, piss themselves laughing and just call you, you know, a lunatic or whatever, or just kill you on the spot, you know, for witchcraft, for trying to propagate witchcraft. And they'd be fucking right to. They would be 100% correct to have that response. The fact that people have had that response bred out of them is why we're in this situation now. But it's only been like 70 years since they consolidated power. 100 years, really, since they consolidated power, truly. Not even, yeah, like 80 years. Like, literally, 70, 80 years. Nothing, bro. Nothing. And it won't last. Like, they know it won't last. When you see the way they prop up the financial system, you have to understand, like, the debt-based system in the first place was entirely like an emergency measure. Yeah, it was to allow them to prop it up for as long as possible, for them to milk as much, you know, wealth that doesn't really exist, and invest that in physical assets, like things that they believe, you know, will last and do last. It's why you see people, when you see people like Bill Gates buying up all that land, you know, all the agricultural land. On some level, I do think that there's, you know, some conspiracy and thing going on. Definitely, almost certainly, he has some kind of thing in mind about they're gonna like stockpile and create like the food shortage kind of thing. They already are, kind of. They always have been. On like chocolate, for example, is one of the things they've always done that with. But also, it's kind of just a, it's a continuation of an instinct these people inherently have, you know, that their wealth will not last. You know, at some point they will need the loyalty of people that they can't buy with numbers on a screen. The only way to get that is to feed them, clothe them, and arm them. That's it. Those are the 3 ways that you buy people's loyalty when you can't pay them. Yeah, when you can't pay them money, you feed them, you clothe them, and you arm them. That's it. Those are the 3 things you can give people. There are no other things people will trade for their life. Sex? 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 What? In a post-collapse world? Yeah, I guess you can kind of. It depends, but again, you need a monopoly on it, and to have a monopoly on it, you need to offer the women, you know, you need to have them under your belt, you know, in the first place. If you're going to control men with sex, through sex, by controlling the supply of women, then yeah, that can be done. But you have to feed, clothe, okay, and shelter the women, you know. I mean, I think feeding and clothing comes under shelter. Like, actually having a house is arbitrary, you know. Humans can live without a house if they have clothes and food. You see it all around you. You'd be surprised, you know, how easy it is to actually subsist like that. I mean, it's not comfortable, it's not nice, it's not fun, it's depressing, and it gets to you, you know. I've been homeless, like I said, I've been homeless, you know, for 3 years practically, on and off, with like long stretches, with small periods in between where I like had temporary accommodation or was staying with a friend for a couple weeks or something, but big stretches where I just I'm very lucky that I didn't end up being on the street too often, because of the kind of the world I was involved in, you know. The life basically that I was living had kind of already set me up for this like nomadic existence. So I was able to still keep making money while I was homeless, carless, just on road, on foot, you know. Every day I was just out making my money so that I could pay for the hotel that day or that night or that week or whatever, that month. And you'd be surprised, you know, if they let people get jobs without having residences and shit on the application. How many homeless people you think you'd still see on the road, man? I promise you, it's not that many. Very few. Yeah? Very few would be like that if they weren't being like caught in this like perpetual downward motion that is not like fucking inescapable, like on some like natural level. It's inescapable because the system is designed to do that to certain people, to make certain people stay down, you know, because they know that people that fall that far, when they get back up, yeah, their outlook changes, their life changes, they're less willing to submit to the things that allowed them to end up in that place in the first place, you know, and they know that. So if you fall off, they want to make sure you kill yourself or die on the street, basically. They don't want you to get out of homelessness. They don't want you to fucking fix your life up and, you know, feel human again. They don't want that to happen. That's like their worst nightmare, is that you can fucking fall off and get it all back in one trade, you know? They don't want that to happen, because you will not be the same person, you know? I've always had kind of fringe beliefs, you know, but going through that, I have no mercy left in my heart, like, for these people. About the only thing that stops me getting down names and numbers, you know, of certain people and certain institutions that I know have been involved in certain things, and just going after them one day by the next, you know, is basically just my family. That's it. The fact that I still have family left. But now that I'm back on a secure footing, kind of, and I'm getting my physical health back and all of this, it would be very easy to radicalize me, put it that point, you know. Very easy to radicalize me into actual physical violence. And it's funny, you know, they've cut people into thinking that, you know, using violence is futile. Both, not just on the convincing people that violence is just this bad thing, but also that, you know, they convince even the people that don't believe it's like something that has no righteous use. They believe it's useless. They've been convinced, like, look, it doesn't matter, you know, if you start killing politicians, they'll just paint you as a bad guy and nothing will ever change. And I'm like, maybe we should ask the Taliban what they think about this. What does the Taliban have, I wonder, that unified them in the face of such